Hello everyone, welcome back to IGCSE English. Today we'll be looking at the theme of isolation/loneliness within Of Mice and Men. This is again perfect for anyone doing GCSE or IGCSE English and looking at, of course, Of Mice and Men, the book. So, without further ado, the first paragraph is we talk about George and Lenny's relationship, because what we look here is it's a complete anomaly to the whole theme of isolation and loneliness that is portrayed within Of Mice and Men. Because as Steinbeck described, the quote you can use here, guys like us that work on the ranches, the loneliest guys in the world, they ain't got nothing to look ahead to. But not us, because I got you to look after me, and you got me to look after you. Therefore, before I even get on to the next bit, actually, the whole bit about George and Lynn's relationship, why it's portrayed by Steinbeck, is basically to show how rare it was at the time of the Great Depression. Because even the boss is thinking, when George and Lenny have their interview, when they go to the ranch, is like, what's your deal with Lenny? That's what the boss says to George, because he thinks George is just going to take Lenny's money, or basically he's trying to use him in a way. There's no actual sentiment of having a friendship or a relationship. Though despite the fact George is Lenny, there is still some loneliness within him. Because, for example, George complains that he could have had a girl, he still goes into old Susie's place, and almost caring for Lenny makes him frustrated and prevents him from living a normal life. That's another kind of theme of loneliness, to show that even though there is a friendship, George is still frustrated, he's still lonely, he still wishes, he had a girl. And continuing on, like where the actual kind of ranch is in terms of the historical context. The name of the area is called Soledad, where the ranch is, and that actually means lonely in Spanish. This is actually quite a nice thing you should put in the introduction. And also, ranch workers like George and Lenny are itinerant, and and they're always working. They're migrant workers because due to the impact of the Great Depression, they've basically become unemployed, and they have to go now from farm to farm just to find a job. And therefore, they don't have time to make friendships. So crucially, I think the first part of this paragraph, you look at George and Lenny's relationship as being a rare anomaly, but then you can, and a rare anomaly as into the theme of and loneliness, but then you can counter it saying that despite this, the theme of loneliness is still present because of George's kind of view that he wishes he could have had a go. Now, second paragraph is all about Crooks. As he says, he always longing for a friendship. A guy goes nuts because if he ain't got nobody. Don't make it no difference who the guy is, as long as he's with you. Crooks, for example, he's not allowed in the bunkhouse because of his colour, and it's his prejudices and it just represents the prejudice that people have to face, our coloured people have to face at the time of the Great Depression. Because it says Crooks, for example, I'm not wanted in there, as in he's not allowed in the bunkhouse. And continuing on with Crooks is that he has his own room. He's isolated in his own room. He has a copy of the I think the Californian Law Code. If I actually have a paragraph here on Crooks in my theme, and here we can look at if I just find it for a minute. Yeah, here we go. The California Civil Code of 1905. As part of his treasured possessions in his room, because Crooks is so lonely that he's just isolated him with just books. And he's simply trying to form a defensive measure, really, against the impact of loneliness. So if I go back to loneliness, so therefore that's what Crooks has to fear. Due to his colour, he isn't able to build any relationship. He's lonely. He's the only kind of coloured man on the ranch, and therefore he's at the bottom of the social hierarchy. That even Curly's wife, or even women actually ahead of him in the social hierarchy, because Curly's wife says to him about how she could get him strung up on a tree. And hence Crook has to retire into his terrible dignity. And therefore, when looking at the kind of historical context, initially you can look at, the Jim Crow laws and the Great Depression, that there was no room for an end to prejudice. In fact, it made it worse, because many coloured people were actually evicted from their jobs first to make room for jobs for white people. There's a fear of being lynched by the KKK, and it all adds to the loneliness that Crooks has to feel. Finally, we look at Curly's wife. That yes, we said that women, for example, are above in the social hierarchy. She's still effectively a possession almost of her husband. That's why she doesn't even have a name. She's not allowed really to go out and build friendships, because at the end of the day, she's the only woman on the ranch. And even her husband tends to leave her to go to old Susie's place within 2 weeks of the marriage. And therefore, when Curly's wife is talking to Lenny, she says, "Why can't I talk to you? I never get to talk to nobody. I get lonely, awful lonely." and it's the fact she's the only woman on the ranch, and also the fact that her husband is the boss's son, means that no ranch worker wants to talk to her because of a fear of getting canned. And also, she's almost like a victim of the misogyny that existed at the time of the Great Depression. Women were just seen more as a possession, rather than being in their own rights. And for example, it's the men who has to find work, and the women don't really get rights in that kind of regard, and therefore she's often referred to as a tart. She doesn't have any power, and this added on to the fact that Curly refuses to let her talk to anyone. She's separated. There's no other women really on the ranch, means that she's effectively a social outcast. And despite the fact that she might be seen as head of crooks in the social hierarchy, sorry, she still is very lonely and isolated. Hence, almost she tries to flirt with lots of ranch workers such as George and Lenny. If, for example, at the end of these 2 paragraphs, you want to do another alternate one, or maybe just a little bit of a mention in terms of isolation and loneliness, you should look at Candy and Candy's dog. For example, Candy has no friends on the ranch. She's the eldest person on the ranch. She's also disabled. Hence, he's all he has really is a sheepdog. And as Candy says, he's had him since he's a pup. Hell of an old sheepdog. And it almost represents how long Candy's flourished. Candy's dog is almost foreshadowing Candy himself. For example, Candy's dog being shot at the end is almost showing that that's what will happen to Candy unless he, does something else. Hence, he wants to join the American dream of George and Lenny. Therefore, you can also look at, for example, Robert Burns' quote, "Is the best laid schemes of mice and men gang after Agony," where the title of the book comes, and it means that no matter how well you plan for the future, things will often go wrong. When it comes to, for example, Candy's dog being shot, breaking this relation, the only real relationship Candy had, because Candy doesn't have too many friends on the farm. He sees everything within his dog, hence he keeps him, even though he's long past the days of his sheepdog days. And yeah, that's if you want to add something else, you can look at Candy and his dog. If you want to see more of Candy and his dog, you should look at the video for, I made a whole video on Candy, how do you like to portray him in Of Mice and Men. But yeah, thank you. Please feel free to subscribe. We'll get more themes going. I have a whole playlist now of all the characters. So yeah, thank you very much. Enjoy.